The crunch of gravel under my tires was the only sound that greeted me as I pulled into the driveway of a house that still didn't feel like home. It had been 6 months. 6 months since Sarah and I had said, I do, 6 months since I'd sold my minimalist downtown apartment, and 6 months since I'd officially become a stepfather to a 15-year-old boy who regarded me with the same warmth one might reserve for a tax auditor. Liam was Sarah's son, a quiet, brooding presence who seemed to be constructed entirely of sharp angles, sharp elbows, sharp knees, a sharp jawline, and an even sharper tongue when he chose to use it, which was rarely with me. He was a silhouette against the bright, chaotic canvas of his own life, and I, Mark, the accountant with a fondness for routine and spreadsheets, was the awkward, uninvited figure photoshopped into the background. My key turned in the lock, a sound that still felt foreign. "Honey, I'm home," I called out, the phrase feeling like a line from a play I hadn't quite mastered. Sarah's voice, a warm, melodic counterpoint to the tension I always carried, floated from the kitchen. "In here, Mark." I found her at the counter, chopping vegetables with a practiced efficiency. She smiled, a genuine, loving smile that still had the power to momentarily erase the lingering awkwardness of my new role. "How was your day?" "The same." Numbers lined up, reports filed. The thrilling saga continues. I leaned in for a kiss. "Where's Liam?" Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "In his room. Been there since he got home from school. He's working on a project." A project was the catch-all term for whatever Liam did for hours on end in his bedroom. We'd given him the space, respecting his privacy, but the mystery was a constant, low-grade source of anxiety for me. Was he okay? Was he just a normal, moody teenager, or was he sinking into a depression I didn't know how to combat? After dinner, a mostly silent affair punctuated by the clinking of cutlery and Sarah's attempts at conversation, I retreated to the living room with my laptop. Liam disappeared back upstairs without a word. Sarah joined me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder. "He'll come around, Mark," she whispered, sensing my mood. "He just needs time." "I know," I said, and I did know, logically. But logic is a poor shield against the daily, quiet rejection of a child you're trying to love. An hour later, I went to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I passed the staircase, I noticed a sliver of light from under Liam's door. And then, I heard it. A sound so soft I almost mistook it for the house settling. The scratch of a pencil. Not the frantic scribble of homework, but a slow, deliberate, rhythmic sound. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. He was drawing. A wave of relief, so potent it was dizzying, washed over me. He wasn't playing violent video games or brooding in the dark. He was creating. It was the first concrete piece of information I'd gotten about his inner world in months. I stood there for a full minute, a silent sentinel in the dark hallway, listening to the sound of my stepson's art. The next day, a Saturday, I decided on a new approach. Instead of my usual retreat to the home office after breakfast, I grabbed my car keys. "I'm heading to the art supply store on Elm Street," I announced, trying to sound casual. "Need anything?" Sarah looked up, surprised. "Art supplies? Since when do you paint?" "I don't," I said with a shrug. "Just thought I'd try something new. Stretch the old brain." I saw the understanding dawn in her eyes, followed by a look of such profound gratitude that it made my chest ache. She squeezed my hand. "That's a wonderful idea, Mark." The art store was an overwhelming assault on my senses. The sharp, chemical smell of turpentine, the dusty fragrance of pastels, the vibrant, impossible rainbow of paints and pencils. I was a foreigner in a strange land. I wandered the aisles, utterly lost, until a young employee with purple hair and a nose ring took pity on me. "You look like a man on a mission," she said with a friendly smile. I need some drawing supplies. For a teenager. A serious one." She led me to a section filled with pristine, intimidating sketchbooks and trays of pencils with designations like 4H, 2B, and 6B. I felt like I was trying to crack a code. "This is a good starter set," she said, handing me a flat tin case. "Graphite pencils, a range of hardnesses. And this Strathmore sketchbook is great for all mediums." I bought it all, along with a kneaded eraser that felt like silly putty and a pack of blending stumps whose purpose I could only guess at. I felt foolish, a man buying a symbolic peace offering, hoping it would be understood. Back home, I didn't make a grand presentation. I simply left the bag on the kitchen table with a note. "Saw this and thought you might find it useful. No big deal, Mark." I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to read a book, my ears straining for any sound from upstairs. There was none. An hour passed. Then too, disappointment began to curdle the hope in my stomach. It had been a stupid, transparent gesture. It was just after dinner when Liam came downstairs. He walked into the living room where Sarah and I were watching a movie. He didn't look at me, but he was holding the sketchbook. His fingers were smudged with graphite. "Thanks," he said, the word quiet but clear, directed somewhere between me and the floor. Then he turned and went back upstairs. It was a single syllable, but it felt like a standing ovation. Sarah squeezed my leg, her eyes shining. "See," she mouthed. That single word was the crack in the dam. The silence between us didn't vanish, but it changed. It became less hostile, more observational. He started spending more time outside his room, often in the living room, his new sketchbook open on his lap. He'd draw while we watched TV, his hand moving with a fluid confidence that was mesmerizing. I made a point of never looking over his shoulder, of never intruding. The sanctity of that sketchbook felt paramount. One evening, about a week later, I was sitting in my favorite armchair, balancing my checkbook, a comforting relic of my old life. I was focused, my reading glasses perched on my nose, my brow furrowed in concentration. I must have been sitting like that for 20 minutes when I happened to glance up. Liam was looking at me. Not a fleeting glance, but a steady, intense study. His eyes were narrowed, his head tilted slightly. He was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. Our eyes met for a split second before he quickly looked down, his pencil flying across the page. My heart did a funny little stutter. Was I his subject? The thought was so absurd I almost laughed. What could possibly be interesting about a middle-aged man doing his accounts? I was the epitome of the mundane. Yet, a strange, warm feeling spread through me. He was looking at me. This became a new, unspoken ritual. Evenings, I would take my chair, and Liam would take the couch. He would draw, and I would pretend to read or work, all the while hyper-aware of his gaze. It was unnerving and incredibly flattering. He was capturing me, not as a stepfather or an authority figure, but as a shape, a form, a play of light and shadow. In his eyes, I was becoming art. Weeks turned into a month. The tension in the house had evaporated, replaced by a comfortable, creative quiet. Then, one Friday night, Sarah was working a late shift at the hospital. It was just Liam and me. The quiet felt different, more fragile. I was in the kitchen, attempting to make us grilled cheese sandwiches, a culinary feat I had mastered. Liam was at the kitchen table, his sketchbook open. The silence was thick, and I felt the old urge to fill it with pointless chatter, to perform the role of engaging stepdad. I fought it, focusing instead on the sizzle of butter in the pan. "You have interesting hands." Liam's voice, so rarely used, cut through the silence like a physical thing. I nearly dropped my spatula. I turned. He wasn't looking at me, he was staring at my hands, which were resting on the counter. I do. Yeah, he said, his voice low. "They're capable, strong, but the fingers are long. You can see the bones and tendons move. It's good for drawing." It was the longest sentence he had ever spoken directly to me. And it was about my hands. I looked down at them, seeing them through his eyes. They were just my hands. They typed on keyboards, held steering wheels, balanced checkbooks. But to him, they were a subject. They were interesting. "Well," I said, my voice slightly hoarse. "Thank you, I think." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was the first one I'd ever seen directed at me. It transformed his entire face, softening the sharp angles, revealing the boy beneath the brooding teenager. He went back to his drawing, and I went back to the sandwiches, but the air in the room had changed. A bridge, delicate and new, had been built between us. The culmination of this strange, beautiful journey came with the Spring Arts Festival at Liam's high school. He had been secretive about his entry, refusing to show Sarah or me what he was submitting. We were both buzzing with a nervous excitement as we walked through the crowded school gymnasium, which had been transformed into a gallery. Walls were covered in paintings, sculptures sat on pedestals, and a constant hum of chatter and laughter filled the air. We found Liam standing near the far wall, looking uncharacteristically anxious. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Liam, this is amazing," Sarah said, pulling him into a hug. "Where's your piece?" He nodded towards the wall behind him. "Over there." We turned, and the world stopped. It wasn't a single piece. It was a series. 3 large charcoal drawings, matted and framed in simple black wood. The first was titled, "The Accountant." It was me, in my armchair, my reading glasses on, my checkbook in my lap. The detail was breathtaking. You could see the faint lines of concentration on my forehead, the way my shirt wrinkled at the elbow, the quiet intensity in my eyes. He had captured not just my likeness, but my essence, my quiet, methodical nature. The second was titled, The Provider. It was a close-up study of my hands, just as he'd observed in the kitchen. He had rendered every crease, every knuckle, every whorl of the fingerprint with such painstaking detail that they looked like they could reach out from the paper. They looked strong, and gentle, and yes, capable. But it was the third drawing that stole the breath from my lungs and brought hot, unexpected tears to my eyes. It was titled, The Father. It was a portrait of my face, but not as I'd ever seen it. He had drawn me looking slightly off canvas, a soft, unguarded smile on my lips. The love in my eyes was unmistakable, a deep, abiding warmth. It was how I looked at Sarah. It was, I realized with a jolt, how I had begun to look at him. He had seen it. He had captured the love I felt but had been so afraid to express, the love I thought was hidden behind my awkwardness and failed attempts at connection. In that moment, surrounded by the noise of the festival, I saw myself not through my own critical lens, but through the eyes of my stepson. He hadn't drawn a stranger, an intruder, or a placeholder. He had drawn a man he was slowly, surely, learning to see as a father. He had made me his muse, and in doing so, he had shown me who I was becoming. I couldn't speak. I put a hand on Liam's shoulder, my vision blurry. He finally met my gaze, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, no wall. There was just understanding. You see, Sarah whispered, her own cheeks wet with tears, her hand finding mine. I told you he would come around. Later that night, after we'd returned home, buzzing with pride and emotion, Liam approached me as I was locking the front door. Hey, Mark. Yeah, Liam. He held out a small, rolled-up piece of paper. This is for you. It's the first one I did of you. I unrolled it carefully. It was a smaller, simpler sketch. Me, on that first day he'd really looked at me. I looked serious, a little tired, and completely unaware that I was being observed. It was raw and honest. I know it's not as good as the others, he mumbled. I looked from the drawing to the boy, the artist, standing in front of me. It's perfect, I said, my voice thick. It's the most perfect thing anyone has ever given me. I pulled him into a hug. It was awkward for a second, his arms stuck at his sides, but then he relaxed and hugged me back. It was quick, but it was real. The story of how my stepson became an artist is also the story of how I, unexpectedly, became his muse. He didn't need me to be cool, or to be his best friend, or to replace his biological father. He just needed me to be present, to be myself. In the quiet patience of his gaze, he found his inspiration, and in the charcoal lines of his drawings, I found my place in his world. He taught me that family isn't always about blood, it's about seeing the beauty in someone's ordinary, and having the courage to reflect it back to them. Our story wasn't told in loud declarations or dramatic moments, but in the soft scratch of a pencil on paper, a sound that now, finally, felt like home.